Hey everybody, I'm Shane Ireland, and welcome to another Global Pipe-Making Exposition. It's 2025, and this year we have something very exciting for all of our carvers around the world. The theme that we chose this year is In Memoriam. With this year's Global Pipe-Making Exposition, we've invited carvers from all around the world to pick one figure, whether it's an artisanal pipe maker, a brand owner, a designer who is no longer with us, that they would like to pay tribute to, someone who is influential not only to the broader pipe world, but to their work in particular. And I think that like many other years in the past, the body of work that this exposition has fostered is incredible, and we're very excited to share that with you today. And thank you again to all of our pipe makers for participating.
Chris Asteriou's entry this year honors not one, not two, not three, but four different historic pipe makers. The first one is Bo Nord's ballerina shape. It's known for sitting upright, as this pipe does, and with this curling bowl that emulates kind of the look of a ballerina endpoint. So he's added that design cue here. Then the second maker is Dunhill. We all know and love Dunhill, and specifically Dunhill's Don shape, which is a poker variant with a little short stubby shank and a longer slightly bent stem. So Chris Asteriou then added that element to this pipe. Thirdly, we have Sixten Everson's Nefertiti shape. This one's a little bit more of a subtle design cue, but in some of Sixten's Nefertiti designs, the rim was slanted at an asymmetrical angle against the rest of the pipe, and so Chris has done that here to this pipe. The Nefertiti also slightly resembles a poker in some ways, so you get that element as well. And then lastly, we have Jorn Mike and his erotique shape, which features a seam along the bowl. And in this piece, Chris did that along the rim, canted it at an angle as well to sort of add to that asymmetrical motif. And playfully, Chris has jokingly referred to this as a BDSM pipe, taking the initials of all four of those pipe makers and bonding them together, so to speak, in this one singular pipe. The grain is absolutely stunning. It fits the shape perfectly, and he's accented it with corian, which is a material Chris has been using quite frequently the past couple years. And to top it all off, it earned his highest Narcissus grade. So thanks so much to Chris.
For this year's Global Pipe-Making Exposition in Memoriam, Jeff Grasick, J. Allen Pipes, has submitted an incredible tribute to Hiroyuki Tokutomi, who passed away earlier this year in 2025. This pipe actually has a very interesting story. First of all, the influence is clear, the sense of movement, the lines, everything about it really screams Japanese, and we really credit Tokutomi with so much of that influence globally. The interesting thing about this pipe is that when Jeff was visiting Japan, maybe 15 years ago, I'm gonna have to check that out, him and Toku shaped a handful of pipes together in Tokutomi's workshop, one of which was the block here that was recently finished out, the other of which is this actual Tokutomi pipe that ended up being a part of Jeff's personal collection. So this is not included, I just have it here for representative purposes, but again, a really interesting and dynamic take on the blowfish shape, and a personal pipe of Jeff's that he treasures, and what he wanted to do was to take that block that had been shaped initially in Tokutomi's workshop all those years ago and finish it. And what you can see here that he's done is he's taken a cue from this particular pipe that Toku finished himself for Jeff as a personal pipe, and has this really interesting sort of white and black palm, ivorite and ivory kind of a stem inlay. So he's incorporated that into this shape here. So again, it definitely has everything that one would expect from a tribute to Toku, especially in the hands of Jeff. And I really love the play on the tribute of the really complex shank accent.
Gustavo Kuna of Martello Pipes hasn't honored a specific person per se, or a specific brand, but rather a specific group of people that one could argue they're the originators of pipe making, and that's indigenous peoples. Specifically, Martello is honoring a people group known as the Nguni people in southern Africa. Gustavo has Afro-Brazilian roots, so a lot of this is a personal homage to his ancestry, but also the pipes that they made. And he has this book that's really cool that has a number of photographs of old 18th century stone pipes made by these Southern African peoples. And they don't look anything like pipes that we smoke nowadays, but they have this sort of flat panel aspect to it, with then the bowl sort of fixed into it. It's hard to describe. If you're able to find photos, I encourage you to do so, and you can see the similarities with this pipe. It also resembles an Paul, so that's what Gustavo sort of referred to it as. And the block of briar that he used is absolutely stunning. The bird's eye is immaculate. If you're a fan of bird's eye and cross grain, this pipe, you can't do it better than this pipe, I'll put it that way. He's topped it off with a boxwood adornment ring on the shank, and he's dotted it in certain places with 18 karat gold pins that, in Gustavo's words, are a reference to these indigenous peoples using the stars as guides and also in spiritual aspects. So he's sort of made reference and honored that aspect in this piece with those gold pins. So beautiful work, really cool inspiration from Gustavo, and an absolutely beautiful piece.
Todd Johnson's submission for the 2025 In Memoriam Global Pipe-Making Exposition, that's a tongue twister, is this piece in front of me. A really incredible take on the fugu shape, the blowfish shape. This one is interesting not only in the quality of its grain and its design and its execution, but the fact that this is sort of a two-part tribute. When I spoke to Todd about this pipe, what he explained to me is that this is sort of the evolution of the blowfish shape in reverse. So you have someone like Hiroyuki Tokutomi, vastly and widely influential for modern pipe making. He had visited Sixten in Denmark in the 70s, got all of that influence from what Sixten and his disciples had been doing, including his son Lars, and sort of took it back and made it his own and continued to push it forward. So Todd's submission here is, what if the evolution of the sort of super crazy and dynamic and really, really fluid and organic blowfish shape happened in reverse? And if Lars had stripped away some of the flourishes and come up with something that is a little closer to the cross-grain shape that originally influenced this shape way, way, way back in the Danish pipe making in its sort of birth in the 60s. So an incredible shape. It's understated. There's a ton of little detail work here. The execution is amazing. It's also earned Todd's highest grade of Phalanx Q. And as a further tribute to Lars, which I think is just a super cool touch, he has serialized the pipe and added his signature by hand. And also you can see noted here on the bag, which is in the Everson style. Really an appropriate tribute to Lars, and a little bit of a nod to our friend Toku as well.
And up next, we have a submission from my good friend Silver Gray. In the past, Silver has, done a lot of things related to the Peterson catalog, which we've really enjoyed, like the nap stem and some of those things. For this year's submission into the Expo, Silver actually pulled from, the godfather, the grandfather, the most prominent figure in modern artisanal pipe making, Sixten Everson. This is an interpretation of Sixten's iconic potato sack shape. So you see that signature sort of very prominent chin, some nice tapering and flaring to the bowl. It's a very organic shape. It's sort of reminiscent of the peewit in line, but with a little bit more of a bulbous, heel. I think in execution, Silver has sandblasted this pipe, and I think she's kept the sandblast really light, which does give it this really nice Danish texture to it. To contrast that, there's a really nice piece of zebra wood that she's using to accent the piece, which sort of plays into like some more cooler tones to contrast the more reddish stain of the bowl, as well as a more sort of traditional walnut stain on the rim itself. So a wonderful piece, very organic, very asymmetrical, but it still feels great in the hand. I think this is like one of the lightest, renditions that I've seen. It would be very comfortable to clench, very comfortable to hold in the jaw. And yeah, just a stellar piece all around.
And next up in the Global Pipe-Making Expo, we have what is one of the most recognizable shapes in artisan pipe making, the paneled horn, inspired by Bow Nord, made by world-renowned artisan Wandi Riotti. It seems like such a simple shape to pull off, but the amount of technical ability it takes to make these dimensions make sense and to make this look fantastic, to get this grain oriented perfectly, it takes a lot of talent. And Wandi just absolutely knocked this out of the park. The grain is phenomenal, to say the least, paired with this ivorite accent, vulcanite stem. Just a wonderfully executed piece to honor such a legend of Bow Nord in our craft. Very well done.
Abe Herbaugh took us back to the early years of pipe making, honoring the old Barling factory. And this piece is an absolutely incredible piece. It is entirely handmade, not just the pipe, but the case itself, from the hinges to the clasp to the actual box itself. Abe hand chiseled the recesses. He hand covered it with leather, hand did the velvet inside by hand as well. And then obviously the pipe itself is handmade, and it is a beautiful, natural bent billiard with some of the most impressive silver work I have ever seen on a pipe or just in general. To talk a little bit about Barling and specifically how Abe is honoring them, if you see old Barling pieces, you'll regularly see these sort of case sets with a shank extension that was military mounted, that was often made of albatross bone. Now, Abe didn't go to the extent of procuring albatross bone. He used more practical vulcanite. But a really, really cool detail is if you ever get the chance to look at these old albatross bone pipes or shank extensions for the pipes, you'll notice that they're not perfectly straight. They have some flex to them, and because they're bone, they're curved slightly. And Abe did that with this vulcanite to resemble the actual albatross bone as much as possible from vulcanite. Then, to top it all off, he handmade this sterling silver wind cap that is pressure fitted or spring fitted, so you don't have to worry about a hinge. You can take it off of the pipe and leave it in the case if you don't want to use it. And again, I will say every single part of this pipe was made by hand, from the mounts to the pipe itself, to the stem, to the shank extension, the cap, the case, everything made entirely by hand by Abe. And we'll get some close-up shots, but he did the tulip work around the rim and the mount and the other mount sections. Super detailed, it's super clean, it's super crisp, it's an absolute amazing work of art. And the name itself even honors Barling. In their old catalogs, they would give these sort of fancy names to these kind of pipes, and one of the names that was actually from the catalog was the Corinthian, and it was a really ornately adorned bent pipe, and so Abe has fittingly dubbed this piece the Corinthian.
This year's In Memoriam Global Pipe-Making Exposition, Kikuchi herself has chosen Charles Peterson as a fitting pipe designer and pipe person to pay tribute to. And what I really like about this is it's a perfect fusion of the sort of classic muscular Peterson proportions and the sort of like deluxe system weird gap stem configuration, with just a hint of something that is Japanese and that is very Ikebana, and that is a single knuckle of bamboo rather than the traditional like silver army mount or silver deluxe system flat mount. So yeah, I really love the sort of juxtaposition of these two styles, one that is more classic and more muscular, and one that is a little more organic and a little more naturalistic and maybe even a little slightly more elegant. And I think it works really well. The execution here is gorgeous. Gorgeous stain. I really love the color palette and the combination here. And more than I suspected, I think this weir style gap that is a signature of Peterson's deluxe system range, I think it works really well with the bamboo accent. A fitting homage to Charles Peterson, and one that I think he would have appreciated.
Jared Coles honored Hiroyuki Tokutomi in this bent Dublin sitter. And while it's not inspired by a specific Toku piece, as far as I'm aware at least, Jared utilized a number of design cues that Toku is renowned for. One of those is simply Toku made a number of different sitting designs. He had a sitting blowfish, vase. He had a number of designs that were signature to him that sat upright. And so Jared took that motif and rolled with it. Another aspect is there's a lot of asymmetry in this pipe. In fact, almost all of it is based in some sort of asymmetry. There's not really any way to divide this pipe symmetrically. Most notably, you have this smooth panel right here that showcases some really nice flame grain that really punctuates against the sandblast. But even the shank has a teardrop line, and it's twisted on its axis. But I guess to go back on what I said, there's a hint of symmetry in the sense that the stem base has been canted to align with the angle of the shank. So there's some parallel design right there, and that was a very, very notable design cue that Toku used. And as a pipe itself, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece, super practical in the sense that it stands, but also artistically, there's so many details to see. It changes composition depending on what vantage point you look at it, and the blast itself is really nice. Jared's got a really nice block of briar, and it's the perfect way to honor Master Toku.
And now we have a submission from Davide Iafisco. This is a really sort of very true to form interpretation of Hiroyuki Tokutomi's signature blowfish sitter shape. I think both in line, proportion, sort of all of the components that make up the actual form, it is very true to Toku's most iconic renditions. There's some really beautiful sculptural lines, a slight bit of asymmetry. But it's still very much optimized for a really comfortable feel in the hand. I think the finish work on this is very beautiful as well. It's sort of a natural finish, a very light blonde treatment that really just allows the grain of the pipe to showcase all of its natural beauty, especially along all the various curves and planes of this specific shape. Davide's also incorporated some little kisses of plateau, which I think is a really nice touch just to add a little bit more of that nod to that Japanese organicism. And then, he's also complemented that with a beautiful piece of brindled vulcanite for the stem. It's a really beautiful color, very evenly striated. I think it adds a nice bit of warmth to the overall palette. But yeah, just a killer piece overall, and I think a great tribute to one of the greats, Tokutomi.
And next up in our Global Pipe-Making Exposition, we have a pipe from Miss Sabina Santos. What I find most interesting about this pipe is that it is such an amalgamation of two styles. Very recognizably Sabina from the color palette, from the choice of accent, the Durat that she uses pretty frequently, stem color choice, but it is also extremely recognizably her inspiration, Sven Knudsen, this square Dublin. Really, really phenomenal shaping. Getting these panels to make sense and be straight and look good is fairly difficult. Also natural sandblast that has lots of crags and crevices. Very good texture on that, and I think it really blends well with Sabina's color palette choices. So a perfect blend of kind of new school pipe making mixed with the Danish pipe school of old. Very, very cool piece that someone will be lucky to have.
David Huber made this pipe in honor of Lars Iversen, and it's a unique piece that's specifically inspired by a Lars Iversen pipe from this book. If you don't know, this book is arguably one of the most important publications in all of pipe history. It's called An Iversen Product, and it is a compilation of photographs of Sixten Iversen pipes, Lars Iversen pipes, and Nana Iversen pipes. So 3 generations of Iversen pipe makers. It's not in publication anymore, so if you're able to get your hands on one, hold on to it. It's an amazing, amazing piece. And there's a specific pipe in here by Lars that David Huber modeled this mushroom shape after. He didn't quite copy it exactly. He put his own sort of inspiration or own sort of interpretation on it, but it's a pretty spot on rendition, and you can see the similarities if you compare it with the one in the book. And it's a rare shape from Lars. It's not something that you would immediately recognize as Lars's style. That's part of the reason why David loves this piece so much. It's his favorite piece that Lars ever made. Like I said, he saw it in this book, and it also combines his relationship with the Everson family. While David didn't have a relationship with Lars or Sixten, he does have a relationship with Nana. He has spent time in her workshop, and she's been very influential in his pipe making career, both stylistically as well as just mentoring craftsmanship stuff. So David wanted to honor the Everson family in general, but specifically Lars, with his favorite Lars Everson pipe.
Adam Davidson. Adam's exposition pipe for the 2025 Global Pipe-Making Exposition in Memoriam. He has chosen Hiroyuki Tokutomi. Another fitting influence. Toku passed earlier this year in 2025, and I think Adam's work, Adam has been known in the American pipe-making scene and globally as well as one of the most innovative and creative voices that we have seen in the last couple decades. And Adam credits a lot of that to Tokutomi's work, not just his work, but the time that he has spent with Tokutomi, both here when Toku's been visiting the U.S. and when Adam had a chance to visit him in Japan as well. So we've seen so much of that influence in Adam's work over the years, and his tribute this year for the exposition is really appropriate in many ways. First of all, and maybe most interestingly, this pipe was crafted from a block of wood that Adam was gifted by Yuki Tokutomi, the daughter of Hiroyuki Tokutomi. So for him, it was a very special project. He was able to use a block of wood that came from Toku's workshop, and actually included with this pipe, you can see here, this is a cast version of the exact block of briar that came from Tokutomi that ended up becoming this pipe. Really cool touch. According to Adam and the rest of us, nobody but Tokutomi could see through a block of briar the way that he did and envision the shapes within it. So it's a beautiful metaphorical tribute to one of the most influential masters of the last several decades. Another interesting thing about this pipe, this freehand here, it's basically a sideways fugu, a sideways blowfish. And Adam said that when he was with Tokutomi, he was watching him shape a blowfish, turned it on its side and drilled it this way. And it's something that stuck with him over the years. It just sort of speaks to the innovation and the daring nature of Tokutomi's work. A really fitting tribute.
As an Italian artist and pipe maker, Giacomo Penzo wanted to honor one of his fellow Italian artisans, specifically Paolo Becker. Paolo Becker is one of the most influential artisans in general, but specifically Italian artisans. And his design aesthetic is something that's immediately recognizable, and one that Giacomo did a really good job of encapsulating in this piece. Giacomo calls this the maple seed. You can see it in this included tamper, half of the maple seed, the signature sort of helicopter falling seeds that we probably all knew and loved as kids. And he modeled the shape of the pipe as well off of that. Now, that's not a Paolo shape. Paolo didn't make anything called the maple seed or anything that really looked exactly like this, which is what's cool about this piece is Giacomo used his own creativity to shape it, but incorporated Becker elements. Specifically, this pinched, wasp-waisted transition was a signature design cue of Paolo, as well as these kind of slender rings around the shank face, and then also the Cumberland stem. Paolo used Cumberland quite frequently, and so while the shape itself is Giacomo, the design cues specifically were definitely and clearly inspired by Paolo Becker.
And now we have a great piece from Jay Mouton. This is sort of an inspiration that pulls from Tokutomi, obviously, very much inspired by his signature mushroom shape. So we have this really beautiful flared bowl and this domed rim that sort of, puddles over one side. It's very asymmetrical. I think Jay's done some really interesting things here with paneling as well. There's lots of different facets along the shank that help contrast with some of the more like organic and asymmetrical and fluid lines of the pipe. I think, when you're looking at this, one of the most impressive things I think is just the accent materials. Like Jay has incorporated kind of a lot of horn in this piece. There's a really lovely horn ferrule that takes up probably like 60-70% of the shank. And that's a really nice contrast with the darker stain of the bowl. And of course, to throw in something a little bit extra, Jay's also crafted this wonderful horn tamper. So collectively as a set, it really ties together nicely, kind of taking Jay's more rustic approach and incorporating it with the wonderful lines and asymmetry and organic flow that we often associate with Tokutomi. Beautiful grain on this piece. I really like the nice touches of plateau along the rim. And just, a really excellent, submission from Jay.
And next up in our Global Pipe-Making Exposition, we have a very intriguing piece from Emiliano Pipes out of Brazil. Emiliano is pretty well known for making small, compact versions of some traditional shapes that I personally love his work. This is interesting because it is a play on his signature elf shape mixed with a Bonord Sphinx iconic shape. I think Emiliano did a fantastic job of merging something so recognizable as the Sphinx with his own elf shape. The color palette, the grain is gorgeous. Something also worth noting that is kind of beautiful and it blends in so well is the Jupati accents nodes that he imprinted in the bamboo. It's subtle, but just adds such a pop of character to the pipe once you look at it. It blends together with the stain choice so well. I love this. Being completely honest, I think this is greatly executed. I think it is brilliant to combine something of his with something of the past, and job well done.
Brighton James honored Hiroyuki Tokutomi in his exposition piece, and specifically Toku's disc shape. It's a really inventive design in the sense that essentially Toku, when making it, took a blowfish and rotated it 90 degrees to be kind of a volcano-ish sort of design. But it's playing with that idea of cross grain and bird's eye, and again, the blowfish and flipping it on its side. And Brighton has made a gorgeous tribute here. And upon first glance, it looks pretty symmetrical, which you don't typically associate Toku with asymmetry. And Brighton's no stranger to crazy freehands and super sculptural and detailed designs. But upon closer examination, you see the asymmetry that Brighton's incorporated in a really tasteful and subtle way. These panels that circumvent the shank face flare out to different degrees and add some imbalance and some intrigue to the design. And you also see the bowl sort of slope in a different direction. And it's like the more you look at this pipe, the more you notice subtle little details that Brighton did as he followed the grain, as he, just sort of followed his own creative process. And you can see Toku's inspiration super clearly, and specifically Toku's disc shape. So beautiful grain, absolutely beautiful craftsmanship. Thanks so much to Brighton.
For this year's Global Pipe-Making Exposition 2025 in Memoriam, Manduela has picked a most fitting tribute, her master, whom she learned from, and her dear late friend, Paul Ilsted. So this pipe has a very interesting story. It is rather large by Manduela standards, a typical sort of Ilsted-style squat bulldog, multifaceted, just an incredible execution of this pipe. This stummel was actually started and rough shaped out by Manduela in Paul's workshop before he passed. She actually told me that he participated a little bit in the making of this pipe, in as much as in passing at one point he decided to shape it a little bit and kind of like take it a little bit further in the process. She kept it unfinished for years after his passing and decided to finish it out, and that it would be an appropriate tribute to him for this year's exposition. Gorgeous pipe, incredible grain, really grand in size, a perfect tribute to Paul that's executed beautifully by his student. This is also ebony wood and antique whale tooth for the stem material. Another sort of fitting tribute to Paul, who really used a lot of interesting stem materials over the years and experimented with a lot of different accent colors and color palette combinations. Just an incredible tribute. It looks just like a pipe that Paul would have made, and you can clearly tell that there's a lot of love behind this one. Also included is a framed picture of Paul. This is very special because it's an exact copy of a picture that has been hanging in Manduela's workshop for many years. It's her personal favorite picture of Paul, and he sort of watches over her and everything that she does in her workshop, and she wanted to make sure that we included a copy of that picture with this pipe.
Trey Rice honored Poole Ilsted in this paneled bent Dublin. And for those who don't know, Poole Ilsted was particularly known for his faceted designs. He is widely considered the master of facets, and a lot of his pipes featured really precise paneling that was both beautiful aesthetically, but was incredibly impressive from a craftsmanship perspective. He would do these facets and they'd be perfectly symmetrical on each side, or all the same width all the way through the pipe. And so, Trey really went for it in this pipe and delivered a really beautiful piece. The facets are beautiful and they don't disrupt the grain at all, which is rare, or it takes a very specific block of briar to do this kind of paneling and not disrupt the grain in any way. But you see the ring grain underneath, the flame grain is stunning, the bird's eye is absolutely beautiful. And it's a really impressive piece from Trey. It takes a lot of skill and time and just focus to make something as precise and crisp as this. The natural finish is stunning, and it's paired really, really beautifully with a musk ox horn accent. So yeah, beautiful tribute to Pooley-Olmsted.
And up next, we have an incredible piece from Jody Davis. Jody took inspiration from the Everson family, specifically Lars Everson, with this piece. It's very reminiscent of Lars's signature ball or acorn shape with the long shank. This one's a little bit more on the acorn variety, but it has like a very spherical bowl. And he's also incorporated that signature dual finish that we often saw from Lars's renditions of this specific shape. So the long shank is sandblasted, and there's this really nice ridge that sort of wraps around the transition and really sets off the bowl to make it look even more spherical than it actually is. It also really frames the grain really nicely, so you have lots of like cross grain and textured, blasted grain along the shank, and then this beautiful, lovely, fiery grained, smooth bowl. And then there's a plateau rim as well to give it that sort of juxtaposition of smooth and textured finishes. It's accented with a slender piece of ivorite, which is a nice visual contrast. And yeah, I mean, it feels great in the hand, and I think it's a wonderful tribute to, inarguably one of, the most important pipe makers in history.
Micah Redmond honored Hiroyuki Tokutomi in this piece, and for those familiar with Toku's work, they will immediately recognize this shape. It's Toku's iconic chanterelle, named after the eponymous mushroom. And it's known for this crazy curling style, broad base, and then this blooming mushroom-looking bowl. And like I said, it's one of Toku's most iconic designs, and Micah has delivered an absolutely gorgeous rendition here. It's not a shape or a design that Micah would typically go for, which is why it's so cool to see him flex his muscles and remind everyone that, hey, I may not make this kind of freehand stuff all the time, but that doesn't mean I don't have the skills and the chops to deliver a fantastic piece like this. Fitting to Toku's design, it sits firmly. It's a beautiful centerpiece sort of showcase desk pipe, and the bowl is full of organic charm and asymmetry. It really does look like it's growing out of the shank as opposed to having been crafted by an artisan. Big chunks of boxwood adorn the ends, give it a really nice tritone color palette, and to present it all, Micah made this beautiful presentation box. It's padded on the inside. The pipe sits in there beautifully, and he's even done a little tribute to Toku here with chanterelle in Japanese kanji characters. So beautiful piece by Micah.
And next up in our Global Pipe-Making Exposition, we have a stunning piece from Danish carver Peter Heding. That is a remarkable tribute to Bo Nord's Nautilus. Short story about my smoking pipe career. The first Bo Nord I ever held in my hand was a Nautilus, a smooth Nautilus at that. And I was kind of just blown away. One, I was a rather new employee, and holding a very expensive pipe in my hand was scary. But also just how amazing and when explained, what a revolutionary shape that was for the time. Just kind of amazed to be holding a piece of history in your hand. And this pipe really takes me back. Peter did an amazing job. capturing the essence of bow in this shaping, capturing bow in this grain. What a tribute. This is also a diamond grade, well deserving of Peter's high grade stamp. Just phenomenal work that someone will very much appreciate.
Werner Mummert, for this year's Global Pipe-Making Exposition 2025 in Memoriam, has picked a very fitting and very elaborate tribute to, I would argue, one of the most influential pipe people that has ever lived, Alfred Dunhill. Dunhill is known as a brand for their innovation in finishing methods, in design. They sort of set the standard for many of the classic shape chart shapes that we all look to now and for the last, century. This is a real and genuine stingray leather wrapped classic shape. It pays tribute to Dunhill's stingray wrapped leather pipes, also known as the Pearl Ray. Back in the day, there was many companies that did leather wrapped pipes in general, and doing it with genuine stingray skin or hide is a painstaking process, and the results are absolutely stunning. I love the juxtaposition of such an intricate and unique and crazy finish to such a classic shape. And it sort of speaks to Dunhill's aesthetic in general, even when they went above and beyond in terms of silver work, accent work, all of the finishes that we know and love today. Mostly it was still understated and classic designs. And I think the choice to do such a elaborate and time-consuming and incredibly difficult finish is such an incredible tribute and fitting to Dunhill and Alfred Dunhill specifically. Thank you so much, Werner. This one's incredible.
Micah Krider of Yeti Pipes honored Hiroyuki Tokutomi in this beautiful volcano rendition. Toku did a number of volcano renditions, and they were unified by this little flicking heel spur at the end. Give it a little extra added line to break up the bottom curve. And so that's the main thing that sort of differentiates this volcano from, other volcanoes that are out there. And Micah's done a beautiful job honoring Toku with this piece. The parts that really shine, though, here are the parts that you probably can't see from there, but they're super intricate paneling work that Micah's incorporated. And specifically, obviously, the shank has side panels here. But on this foreside of the lower bowl, there's a little panel that coalesces into a ridgeline that follows the grain up to the rim. And he's counterbalanced that by a similar ridgeline, but closer to the transition here, that then also follows the grain in a ridgeline up to the rim as well. So it's playing with this sort of twisted, asymmetric aspect, but there's still balance in the sense that it's on both sides. And Yeti's finishing work is top tier, among the best. The gloss is incredible. The contrast stain is insane. It's like a tiger Bengal contrast stain that's, it just pops. That's the only way to describe it. And what I also like is Yeti's known for his use of Bakelite. He's done that here. And this specific caramel swirled Bakelite, if you will, does a really good job of matching the stain of the stummel. I'd seen this pipe in pictures before, but seeing it in person, it really does keep a consistent color palette that really works well. So thanks so much to Micah, and it's a great tribute to Toku.
All right, and then from Dirk Heinemann this year, we have a really special piece. It's sort of a fusion of a fellow German carver, Christian Wolfsteiner, as well as elements from Tokutomi, blended in with his signature, Dirk's signature Dora shape. So what we have is this really nice sitter with this blowfish-like qualities, these nice disc-like panels that really frame all of the grain super well. The accent on this piece is really interesting too. It's sandblasted olive wood, so you get smooth olive wood has those sort of ink on water grain patterns, and I think sandblasted you get a little bit more of like a more rustic texture that really contrasts well with the glossy, smooth finish of the pipe itself. It's very interesting to hold in the hand. It feels great. And yeah, dynamically in profile, it's just wonderfully elegant despite being on the larger end. So yeah, just an excellent submission from Dirk, fusing all these different styles into something that is really more than the sum of its parts.
Next up in our Global Pipe-Making Exposition, we have what is a very cool piece from Ryan Alden out of Texas. This is to honor Gert Holbeck, who was wildly influential in the Danish pipe making scene, most notably for contributing to the Pipe Dan catalog. Gert and Pipe Dan in general, in my opinion, is just a Danish staple that doesn't get talked about enough when we're mentioning Danish pipe making and years of pipes made in years past. So I was super excited to hear that Ryan chose kind of a deep cut to do for this in memoriam. This is a play on the Pipe Dan ambassador shape, and Ryan just absolutely knocked this out of the park. In Pipe Dan fashion, it has the old school Danish kind of medium brown stain, no accents, vulcanite stem. It is recognizably Danish. It is recognizably Pipe Dan, and I think this is quite an awesome tribute to a Danish legend.
Austin Quinlan has honored Jorn Mike in this bent apple rendition, and it's based on a specific Jorn shape. And it's one that other makers have riffed on as well. And it's more or less defined by a rounded apple bowl, but then a shank that ends in a lens-shaped face that's then tilted on its axis to add some asymmetry. But Austin's taken some creative liberties that are really, really cool in this piece. He's also made the bowl asymmetric, following the grain and sort of balancing out the twist of the shank. And then lastly, on the stem, he shaped the base of the stem to match the face of the shank, but twisted it the opposite way. So you have this sort of X feature when you're looking at it from the smoker's perspective. So from stem to shank to bowl, there's asymmetry flowing all the way through this piece. And Jorn was known for his asymmetry and for this shape specifically. So it makes Austin's version a really, really nice tribute to Mike.
Bill Shalosky, for his 2025 Global Pipe-Making Exposition in Memoriam, has chosen Rainer Barbie. I really love this choice because Rainer is one of those vastly influential pipe makers, and I think that in many ways, even though he had a cult-like following and produced a ton of amazing work, I feel like he was one of those pipe makers that other pipe makers recognized, maybe even more than the general public, as being a master, both in terms of his craft and also his execution of design and his fresh voice in pipe making. Bill's homage to Rainer Barbie, he has chosen this really lithe and elegant bent Dublin that features a paneled shank and a smart accent on the stem. It definitely speaks to Barbie's sort of understated elegance and intricacy and complexity of shape without being all flourish. You end up with a very, like I said, elegant in profile classic shape where there's so much detail that the smoker and the person holding the pipe can appreciate. Also, Bill told me anecdotally that back when he was an emerging pipe maker going to the shows and Barbie was still with us, that Barbie was one of the sort of first legendary pipe makers that really sat with him and coached him and gave him feedback. And to this day, Bill still holds that very special place for Barbie. Yeah, it was a fitting tribute and I think a lovely execution.
And next up in our Global Pipe-Making Expo, we have a absolutely stunning pipe from Chinese carver Ping Zhan. This is about the 10th time I've held this pipe in my hand, and I'm still kind of amazed at how cool it is. This is quite obviously a tribute to the late great Hiroyuki Tokutomi. It is a play on Tokutomi's Blowfish. It is most notably Tokutomi in the shank and stem transition, the way he melded those two together and made them fit, very symmetrically. Just phenomenal. Natural stain. The grain is striking. I could look at this all day and kind of still be perplexed. And in Tokutomi fashion, the lines and the way everything flows and melds, you could kind of look at this pipe all day and still not quite know where these lines start and where they finish. Also, you have some really cool plateau on the shank as well as the side of the bowl. I'm just enamored by how cool this pipe is. What a great job Ping did, and this will go to a very happy home in honor of Tokutomi.
Pete Prevost has honored Paolo Becker in this bent billiard rendition, and while not an exact copy of how Paolo would have made this shape, Pete's incorporated his own sort of creative, artistic design elements into it. But what I love is the specific little nods to Paolo that Pete has done. The shape in general is representative of Becker's work. Becker was known for this bent chimney stack sort of design. And it kind of has an egg-shaped bowl, which would be how Paolo would do it. And most indicative, though, is this pointed heel. That was a signature Becker design cue that's been followed by Paolo's son, Federico. And Pete's obviously kept that spur here. The shank is a little bit stouter than Paolo would have done, which is Pete sort of incorporating his own artistry into it. But leading into the stem, we have these 2 rings of boxwood, which is signature Becker. And my favorite part is Becker's stem logo was a lowercase b, and Pete flipped that upside down to make a P. And it's one of those things that if it didn't have that, you wouldn't think anything about it. But the fact that Pete thought of that extra detail just makes this piece even better and elevates it to a new level. Lastly, it's been made out of strawberry wood, which was oft-used material by Becker. And as Becker would have done, it's stamped with an S to signify that it was made of strawberry wood. So you get that lovely strawberry wood sandblasted texture that it's known for, and a beautiful piece by Pete that maintains, his personal design elements, but clearly honors the design elements that Paolo Becker was known for.
And there you have it, folks. Another Global Pipe-Making Exposition in the books. For 2025, the In Memoriam theme. I really appreciate the participation of all of our pipe makers around the world who participated, the innovation, the quality of the work. Just like with other expositions, it's the absolute highest caliber of pipe making that you will see today. And we really hope you enjoyed it. And once again, I'd like to thank all of the carvers who participated. Thanks, everybody.